Hi, I'm Jackie Stapleton and welcome to Atoll TV. Today I'm here to help you with understanding the requirements of ISO 14001. If you like this video and want to see more great content, then click on the subscribe button and the bell icon. It costs nothing to subscribe and you can unsubscribe at any time. In this video, I'm going to cover the requirements of Clause 4.2, understanding the needs and expectations of interested parties. I'm going to break it down and turn it into something you can understand. You'll then be able to apply this to your own organisation system and understand what the requirements look like for you. No more guessing. Okay, let's get started. Clause 4.2 is called Understanding the Needs and Expectations of Interested Parties. There are a few points in this clause, so I'm going to break them down and explain them individually. The first point, point A, states that the organisation shall determine the interested parties that are relevant to the environmental management system. Before we can understand this fully, I think we need to take a step back and understand what an interested party is. So I checked this in the Terms and Definitions clause of ISO 14001, so that's in clause 3, and it states that an interested party is a person or organisation that can affect, be affected by, or perceive itself to be affected by a decision or activity. They give examples like customers, communities, suppliers, regulators, investors, and employees. So that makes sense, doesn't it? We need to ask ourselves that when we make a decision, a change, or introduce a new activity or product even, who might be impacted by this? A great tip for this is to separate who might be impacted either internally to the business or externally. This internal and external suggestion is not a mandatory requirement, but I do find it helps me to think broadly. As an example, internally this could be employees, the owners or shareholders of the business, subcontractors, or even the board of directors. Externally, this could be suppliers, communities, regulators, government bodies, customers, and even visitors to the workplace. Identifying these interested parties is the first step, and then the next point in this clause, point B, states that the organisation shall determine the relevant needs and expectations, in other words, requirements, of these interested parties. So, now that we have identified who these internal and external interested parties are, we need to determine what they expect and need from us. I've actually seen this laid out quite nicely with an audit client I visit. This company simply uses an Excel spreadsheet, and on worksheet 1 they've listed their interested parties and whether they are internal or external, and then finally the reason for their inclusion, which I think is a great addition as it demonstrates their thought process. Then on worksheet 2, they've extended from this list of just interested parties and added another column documenting each interested party's needs and expectations. So, for example, employees expect and require appropriate environmental training, and regulators would expect compliance to any relevant legislation applicable to what activities they conduct. What this client has also done is they've extended this even one step further, and they've documented in this final column what their company's needs and expectations are from these interested parties. So it goes both ways. It's a relationship. And I do think that while this additional step isn't a requirement in this clause, it really opens up the relationship and demonstrates that these needs and expectations do go both ways. So if I recap on those examples from earlier, I can explain this two-way street. Again, employees expect and require appropriate environmental training from the organisation, and in turn, the organisation expects compliance to these requirements. Now, Before we move on to the final point in clause 4.2, let us revisit the clause requirements for points A and B and see whether they now make sense with what we've learnt and understood. Okay, the organisation shall determine A, the interested parties that are relevant to the environmental management system. Check. We achieved this by determining who these were, both internal and external to the organisation. Then B states that the organisation shall determine the relevant needs and expectations of these interested parties. Check again. We achieve this by documenting what each of the identified interested parties expected from an organisation. So compliance, training, and so on. Of course, I've only used a few examples here, and when you go through this process within your own organisation, it will be so much clearer because you understand your business. Now, it's time to move on to the final point. Point C states that the organisation shall determine which of these needs and expectations become its compliance obligations. This should be a natural process from the work you've completed for points A and B. See, the standard doesn't make it that hard for us. Even in the example I used for the needs and expectations earlier, you would identify local laws, regulations, and environmental compliance requirements. So, of course, this will prompt the identification of what I'm going to call a risk. When needs and expectations do identify legal requirements, then the next step is to determine what they are and how your organisation is going to comply with them. This does feed nicely into clause 6.1.3, compliance obligations, which I'll cover in a later video. Now, compliance obligations are referring to legal requirements and other requirements. We know that legal requirements is what we have to comply with, right? It is not an option. We have to comply. This point also refers to other requirements though. So it seems rather vague, right? But other requirements can still be contained. It is essentially what your organisation chooses to conform with. So this could be your own environmental management system. It could be contractual arrangements with customers, employment agreements, or even voluntary environmental programs within the community. Define what these other requirements are based on your initial list of interested parties and their needs and expectations. So if you take a helicopter view of this now, you'll see that this process in itself has identified risks and opportunities to your business. I love it when you can see it like this. It isn't just a pointless exercise to tick a few boxes against a standard. This process actually benefits your business. It helps you to identify the risk so you can put in place controls or treatment plans. It helps you to identify the opportunities out there and leverage off them to be proactive in your environmental management system. This is fantastic stuff. Get excited by it. Thanks for joining me, and do not forget that Auditor Training Online is a recognised training provider, so we are confident that you need to enrol with us now. Go to our website and enrol to transform your work and industry experience into a recognised qualification. And also, please subscribe to Atoll TV and leave a comment or question, as I truly do want to help you to join the best career out there with me, auditing.